Mr. Biden, today is October 27th, 2023. As a human of no special consequence, but as an American, I want to speak as directly as I can to the figurehead of my government with respect to these events that are unfolding in Gaza and in Israel right now. Specifically, I want to address the military and financial support you're rushing to offer and the possibility of a wider conflict that unqualified support of Israel could bring right now. Today marks 20 days since the 1,400 murders of October 7th. Since then, we've seen thousands more deaths in Gaza from relentless aerial bombardment, but no ground invasion as of yet. There's been some other regional violence, but the physical conflict has so far mostly been isolated to Gaza. Now, before this goes any further, I want to ask you in the strongest terms to do everything in your power to contain and diffuse this violence. The U.S. is in a privileged position aside from military and financial leverage. There is a way to appeal to Israel that no other country can, morally. But to do that, we have to first publicly and vocally acknowledge our biggest mistakes. Unfortunately, Israel didn't get one of the most important lessons of the period just after 9/11. There was a huge global outpouring, not just of outrage at al-Qaeda, but of solidarity and support for the U.S. And after October 7th, just like after 9/11, the majority of the world shared in the horror of the Hamas murders and felt genuine sympathy with the people of Israel. But just as the global community recoiled at watching American vengeance and unchecked militarism, so again it is happening with Israel. The U.S. wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, etc. permanently disfigured the way Americanness is viewed in the world. Even to ourselves, if we're honest, we are more villain and less hero than we used to be. In my view, offering true friendship to Israel means cautioning them against repeating our mistakes. Unchecked Israeli violence against Gaza will damage Israel's standing in the world. It'll endanger more Jewish lives. It'll inspire more violent extremism and quite possibly destabilize the whole region. That is my appeal for restraint in the context of my support of Israel. Now, with respect to Palestinian rights, there are not many constraints on Israel right now, but the U.S. is certainly one. And so far, in that respect, your administration has shown an almost absolute absence of leadership. Acknowledging what a pressurized cauldron of Israeli and Palestinian trauma is boiling over right now, sober guidance has to be the way forward. Some people say that because of the emotional state of a post-October 7th Israel, it's unreasonable to expect a proportional or even a sensible response. I reject this, and it's my opinion that your administration has given cover and possibly even encouraged the horrors we're now witnessing in Gaza. And considering the increasingly real possibility of a regional hot war, even calls to attack Iran by some U.S. senators and presidential hopefuls, it's imperative that you do everything in your power to lower the volume. Urge restraint of Israeli bombing. By all means, discourage a ground invasion and stand as an impartial peace arbiter to the best of your ability. Compromise that your standing might already be. Please, Mr. Biden, please show us that you're not in the pocket of American defense contractors. So far, instead, you're making appeals for the complicity of the American people. You want to send more of our treasure and arms into the conflict, and most unbelievably, rhetorically bundling the Ukraine war with the Gaza war, almost as if you're inviting multipolar global alignment of this conflict. This is twice failed 20th century thinking with absolutely no place in the modern world. I ask you in this context to banish the concept of terrorism from the conversation completely, especially as a foundational justification for a lack of Israeli restraint as the bombing continues. It encourages oversimplification, even binary thinking in the face of a very complex situation, which can only be counterproductive if peace really is the objective. Now, I have another request. I ask you to do what should be prerequisite for any head of state, but especially of this state. I ask you to hold as a self-evident truth the equal value of the life of a Palestinian child and an Israeli child, earnestly and honestly. Even amidst all the shouting, I don't think the truth of Israel's right to defend itself has come into question by any reasonable good faith actor. But now, as this ground invasion seems more and more inevitable, can we also consider it true, as the UN has said, that Palestinians have a right to defend themselves as well? Or are they all terrorists now? Here's a thought experiment. Let's imagine a 16-year-old Palestinian boy. Call him Salman, born after the last open elections in Gaza. So even though Hamas was already in power when he was born, Salman had never been political. But last week, he witnesses the death of nearly his entire family under an Israeli attack using a US-made bomb. Now, when the ground invasion of Gaza begins, what do you think the likelihood is that Salman picks up a rifle in an attempt to preserve his life and the life of, say, his last remaining sibling, his little sister? Is he now Hamas? He's a terrorist? Does that even matter in the slightest? By greenlighting the ground invasion and by financing and arming the young IDF soldiers who are now in harm's way, defending themselves and their friends against Salman's rifle, your administration is eradicating the only acceptable possibility that this inflection point only just barely still holds. That the continuum of the horrific past and a nihilistic version of an inexorably violent future might just be severed. It might be paused by an unambiguous and clear demand for an immediate ceasefire by the only party that can make such a demand. If you fail to act, you, more than anyone, are ensuring that these young IDF soldiers and Salman and his friends and his sister are condemned to a battle to the death. It doesn't have to be this way. You can and you must call for a ceasefire. Continue brokering hostage releases. Do everything possible to avoid more bloodshed. Because every young Israeli and every young Palestinian that is martyred in this mess leaves more radicalized family and friends behind, sworn to continue the bloodshed. If you fail to act, and this conflict grows, and ensnares the US, the UK, the EU, other Arab states, Iran, or others, history will remember that it was your lack of foresight, your moral failure that allowed it to happen. Over your long career, I'm sure there are things you're proud of and some you regret. But the omnibus crime bill, what you did to Anita Hill, even your vote on the authorization to invade Iraq, they will all pale in comparison if you fail to intervene in Gaza now. Not only do I predict you'll lose in 2024, but your legacy will be viewed primarily in light of this political, moral, and human failure. Or maybe you can be the one to broker a real peace. But please, man, now, go and do the right thing for all of our sakes.